In this final part of the video, I'm going to show you an asset that I made using Redshift and Cinema 4D and the setup that I used for the material nodes. And this really uses a lot of the settings that I commonly would use, and I think they'll be helpful for you to see what I've done with this, including some quite complex setups regarding the communication between materials and displacements. So the first thing is that's just turn off this IPR so we can see the geometry, and we're going to start with the main material that's assigned to there by opening this up. Now this was done or textured within Substance Painter. So within Substance Painter there's a variety of materials. So the first thing I'm going to do, shall I say textures, not materials. Let's just have a quick look at these textures and then you'll see how I've applied them. So we've got the color maps here. So these are the color maps. Now I believe there was two versions of this. Just have a look at this. Yeah, so one version is an 8K map and one of them's a bit smaller, I believe. There is some difference between the two, and we see that when we go in there. We've got the displacement itself, and what you'll notice here is I've actually got several displacements, which is going to be quite interesting for you to look at, because I've got some animation going on within inside this scene, and the animation is going to change the detail which is on the surface of the fish. So it's important that I get a transition of detail going between one animation and another, and this is primarily for the creases in the fish mouth. Then we've got the metallic map, and this is to do with the reflection, and it's set to a metallic type setting here for its reflection. I'll show you this. We've got the normal map that you would expect. We've got the roughness, which is going to set up just how glossy and shiny it is, or reflective. This is the amount. Can't remember what that one was. It looks like it's a different UV map, so ignore them ones. What we do have is a subsurface scattering map. This is the amount of subsurface scattering that I wanted to apply differently in certain areas. So I wanted the fins to have more subsurface scattering in those particular areas, so that the light would shine through it to highlight that within the animal, make it look more realistic. And that's really it, really. So let's go back into Cinema 4D and the shader setup for this, and you'll be able to see exactly what we've done with this. So first of all, we'll start from the top and we'll see what we've done with this. This is the actual base color itself. See there, the base color, and this is going straight down and plugged into the diffuse color. Now the good thing is in the way we can actually get textures into here, you don't necessarily have to go through the process of going down here to select the texture or start to type in texture. You drag and drop that into there, and then you select that node, and then you can select your texture map inside the path. That is one way you can do it, but you don't have to. You can simply go to your browser and you can drag and drop a texture of your liking straight into the node space, and that will automatically load the texture into the path, in which you can then plug it straight into where you want it. So that's, for instance, show you how things plug in. You just go to this little tiny output port here, and then you just simply go and plug it in. It's as simple as that. There's not really much else that you need to do with this. I'm just going to backtrack a couple of stages there. In fact, I tell you what, let's just bring this back in there and from scratch, and I'll show you. So that's the one. So base color 101. Looks like the map that I used. There we go. So just drag and drop that in there. Then you've got the output color. You drag that and then let go, and it goes into the output color, and it's done. That is it. It's that simple with the node space, just as you would expect it to be with any other node space. You just drag it in. Now with the materials, if these ports ain't there to start with, what you do is you just go the output and you just go into there, and then it opens up the available inputs. You can see there. So we've got general, advanced. Now what you'll see inside here is that you only have the options here for the ones that are available that are not used. So you can see that diffuse color has already been added into the base properties. There it is, base properties. It's already been assigned for us, so we can just drag and drop that and put it into there. For the other ones, roughness, I'll just disconnect this for the moment. So in the material itself, you will notice that I set the Fresnel type to metalness, which is what you need for Substance Painter. When we bring our roughness map in, we simply go into here, we go to our reflection area, that's refraction. Oh, there they are, reflection and roughness. So now it's plugged into the reflection roughness, and that's done. The next one is metallicness. Now sometimes, as you may find with render engines, you may have to do some color correction, and this is where you can select the color correction node and put it between that and the target. So for instance, the metallic one, I wanted to adjust that to be a little bit more metallic than it was. So again, you can just go into here and you can type in start to type in color, and then you've got these in here, color correct, and the color correction allows you to adjust the gamma, the contrast, the hue, saturation, what you would expect for that to happen. You can even input your own color to be mixed in with that for color correction, like a kind of filter. So the metallic map is plugged into the input of the color correction, out the color correction into the metallic input of the material. So that's pretty straightforward, and you can see what I've done here. I've actually changed the gamma slightly and the contrast for this. This one here is for subsurface scattering, so you can see here indeed it's plugged into the subsurface scattering layer 1 and into the color. Now for the subsurface scattering, if we just go into there quickly, we've actually got 3 layers of color. You can see there, and it's layer 1 that has actually got a map plugged into it, hence where you see this, the input here looks slightly different to the other inputs, because you can see I've not used an input for color for layer 2 or layer 3. So that's what it looks like, to let you know that there's actually a texture connected to there. The normal map I haven't got plugged into here. The displacement is quite interesting because this is actually enclosed. If I can just open up the group, this is actually a group of displacement maps. So when I click on, double click on this, what you should see is you should see the whole group open up. There it is, and you can see in here that I've applied multiple displacements. Now typically, if I come back out of here, typically what you'll find is that you would just get a, let's just drag and drop this to show you this. This is a displacement map. What you would do is you drag and drop your displacement map into there, and inside here for your nodes you would type in DIS for displacement and then drag and drop that into there. Connect your displacement map into the displacement texture map, you see that, and then you come out of your displacement and you go into the purple one of your output shader. You can see there it's plugged right into there, and then you can go back to your displacement and make any adjustments that you need to the displacement. Now in this displacement node, you've actually got the height field, which is normal displacement, and you've got a vector displacement in here as well. With normal maps it's slightly different. I'll just show you this. So I'll just drag out, this is a normal map typically. In fact, I've already got one in there, so we can use that one. For this one, we type in bump, because it's a type of bump map. And what we do is we drag the bump node. Again, we connect this to the input of here, and it will be applied as a texture. Texture input, and then what we then do is we select this in the height field and turn it to tangent space normal. Okay, and you've got the normal things you would expect, like to flip the Y normal, because sometimes it needs that. And then what you do is you go out of here into your material, and it's in the base properties, I believe. It's not normally, oh, there it is. Overall bump, that's for the one. So you go into the overall bump map, and that is where bump will be applied alongside your displacement for extra detail. So that's what you can do there. Now, just backtracking, you notice that when I opened up my displacement that I had multiple displacements. This is because I use a node called Displacement Blender, and the Displacement Blender allows you to plug in multiple displacement maps, and you can see that's exactly what I've done. So first of all, you have your base. This is your base one with displacement. This is the one that you would have just generally on your model, and then you would have layer 0 and layer 1. So that's select my displacement blender. So this is layer 0, layer 1, and you can even put in another layer, layer 2. So in other words, what you can have is you can have 4 displacements at once. So your base level, level 0, 1 and 2. And then what you can do with this is you can blend how much of that displacement will be coming through in the render. You can see there that I've got currently it blended to 1. But I've got things set up a little bit more complex than to simply using this slider to blend it like that. I've got it automated so that when I apply a morph target inside Cinema 4D, it will automatically adjust the blend weight for that displacement. It will bring different details out according to what morph I'm actually applying. So that's really a handy thing to have. We can go back in there and you can see here that it's automatically collapsed in here. So we've got 3 displacement sides inside here. Now, along with there being ability to apply multiple displacements, you can also apply multiple bumps, and you can see it here, a bump blender, and you'll see something very similar in here. You can grab a bump map and plug this into the base level, and then you can plug an additional 3 bump maps that may hold completely different details and then blend them in. This is very handy for if you wanted to fine-tune the details of your model. You may have wrinkles separate from skin pores, separate from hairlines, separate from, say, scales of a creature. So you could actually dial these separate bump maps in, or normal maps, or displacement maps, and really fine-tune them. And this saves you going back into Photoshop and having to work with layers, combine them, save a single map out, and then hope it works, and then you can go backwards and forwards. This way it's already there for you, so you can apply multiple displacements and multiple bump maps. That is what I found very handy to be able to do, and that is really all there is to this. Sometimes nodes look very complex, but when you actually break them down, it's normally a replication. It's a bit like when somebody sees a mixing console for the first time. They see hundreds of knobs, but in reality you just break it down to one strip, and you learn that one strip, and you just see there's a replication of them because they're all different channels, but they're the same thing. And this is often the case I've found with node systems, is that there's a lot of replications going on inside there. And this brings me to the obvious thing with nodes, is that you can use multiple, so I say you could use single textures to drive multiple factors. And this is where nodes come into itself. You could get the roughness map as an example here, and simultaneously go into the roughness slot and maybe go into another area within here to control the diffuse roughness simultaneously. So you're using one map now to control two different parameters. You can do this with multiple maps, bring them together, and even use a material noise to combine them. And that's something that's very, very powerful, to be able to drive multiple attributes from one single map. Very, very powerful indeed. But we will come and undo that and come out of this. So back to here again, we've got this carp, and you can see here I've got this mouth in and out. Now when I open up the mouth, it's actually a slider up here, I've actually put a user slider. What's happening here is this is actually set to drive the map inside here. And I'll see if I can show you this in the displacement map. So we open up displacement. What we're looking at is the blending of here. Okay, when I adjust this, you'll see that it's switched the blending between one and another. You see that as I'm going up through there, and what it's doing is it's blending between layer 1 and layer 2 that have different displacement maps. They have different details. So as the mouth comes out, you're going to see the crinkles change and fold like it really would be in real life, and that is a major advantage to be able to link these post morphs with attributes of that. It's very, very powerful without doubt to be able to do that kind of thing. But that's kind of going off into the more technical area, but you can see that it can be done. Up until this point I've been showing you this IPR, but there is actually a dedicated window for rendering, and that is also found in the Redshift area up here, this little tiny drop down, and this is called the Redshift render view. This opens up its own box dialog, and you can do the IPR type preview for this. So that's doing that real time right now. So if you do any changes, you're going to see those changes update. The good thing about working in here is you can also save some time with this. You can actually use our render region with the shift key, and it will really speed things up, so you can see like displacements come through and see if you set things up correctly. So this allows me then to change my displacement. You will see that as the mouth comes out around here, the detail will change, and that's go a little bit closer. Around this area here, and we will bring it out a stage at a time. You can see the displacement starting to change now, and as the mouth unfolds, a different set of details is going to come out. And we'll take it to the top. There we go. Now, without that displacement plugged into it, it simply would not be giving you that effect. So if I was just to disable that displacement on this layer, this is input 0. So I'm going to just, on the other screen here, I'm going to remove input 0. And I want you to see what happens as I remove this. Right, there you go. So we've lost that additional deformation there. We've got a separate displacement permanently applied for the skin detail, but there was actually a level of deformation there when the ellipse came out. So if I was to go back and put that back in, you'll now see all this extra deformation that happens at the render level, but when it's tied up to the shader. So you're able to do that kind of thing with relative ease. And of course, you can take this off at any time and then pick another area for a render region. And of course, you can go into your post effects up here to add things like a global color control. If I turn that off, you can see there we've got a bit more saturation, a bit more of that. And anything you do in here, let's say for instance we had I mean, we have got a little bit of bloom, but let's say for instance we'll give it a little bit extra oomph to that bloom. We allow that bloom, and I've gone to a bucket render now. And what it will do is it will render it, and then it will apply the bloom afterwards. These render settings are actually set very, very high for production level, which is why it's taken a little bit longer than normal, but it's still going for it pretty quick. It's got subsurface scattering on there. I believe it may have GI turned on, I believe. Not quite sure. But we'll just let that finish that, and then I want you to notice that after it does this, it's going to apply the bloom. And actually we've actually got I believe Atlas denoising on this as well. Not quite sure, I haven't looked for this scene for a while, but you will see that this bloom applies in any of the post effects, and we don't have to render it again, by the way. We can actually adjust all of these after the count of the render's done, without having to re-render it again. So it's going down to the end, nearly there. You can apply this all real time, but I prefer just to leave it be. Got a bit of bloom on there. And what I wanted to show you here is anything that you do in here, when it comes to rendering your animation, what you would do is you would render it out in your normal picture viewer. Because your picture viewer, I've actually set it to auto save, I don't want that on. What will happen is it will actually apply all of those post effects that we've set up. At the end of the render, it will have all of the bloom, the color correction and everything on every single frame for our animation. And of course it's great that we can use the picture viewer, because in our layers for our multipass, if you've got any set up, they all will show in here in our multipass, and they'll all be set up for us automatically, so we get a correct output to bring into Photoshop or Natron as an example for our post work. But you can see here that it's ripping through that relatively quick, considering how large this actually is and how high the settings are. I've got like crazy high settings. This particular asset was made to put into a pond for multiple scenes for a client. He wanted multiple scenes made for his product labels. I believe he's actually rendering an animation right now. Yeah. See that? It's actually rendering out an animation right now. I just stop that. I should have set that to single frame, just the current frame. So you have to take my word for that. Basically, it will apply all the post effects to there, and your AOVs will actually appear in there. So if I was to go into the Redshift AOV, we can add the beauty pass, diffuse lighting, global illumination if there's any, reflections, refractions, specular, subsurface scattering, I think that would do for now. And then we go for a render, and you see here in the layer that we've got all of these AOVs put in there for us. And if there's any in there that I didn't originally apply, there you go. So we turn on that one again. There we go. So without that beauty pass added, we've actually got, and we're previewing right now, all the multi-pass layers correctly set up for us, Photoshop, which is output into a single image, which is what I've selected here. This is the single image, and this is the multi-pass. So what we can do from this is we can actually have everything looking exactly the same. We go to a file, and when we save image as, this is where we go to a still image or an MP4, and I would select a PSD for Photoshop. 16-bit is normally preferred for my case, but 32-bit obviously is going to be the best, but you can't do a lot with 32-bit in Photoshop. You want to definitely save your layers, and I think that would be all there would be to choose for that. And then you save that out, and then when you bring this into Photoshop, you're going to have all of your AOVs already set up for you, and then you can tweak those AOVs to take your render to the next level. I've just opened up this inside Photoshop now, and what I want you to note, what we're seeing right now, which is the render, and it's actually automatically put our passes in there for us. So we can actually work on these passes one by one and do some color corrections to them. Or so that's, say we will start with brightness and contrast and apply that just to that level. We can change that. I'll definitely normally use levels, for example. Hue and saturation is a biggie for me. We can change that hue. As you can see on this time lapse, I'm doing some basic alterations on the AOVs so I can get a final nice output for a final render. In the case of an animation, I would use Natron to do the post work in there, very similar to what I'm doing here, only it'll be video.